Hello gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Now before we begin, I would like to thank Mr. Cloud for making this video possible. Now when it comes to traumatic experience, it is very different to everyone. And I am pretty sure that I can't speak for every single one of you here because, well, everyone's severity of trauma is different. But nevertheless, I'm going to tell you gentlemen what works for me and how I managed to eventually overcome my traumas. So as the title of the video said, I had traumatic experiences when it comes to betrayal, abuse, and loss. But being betrayed was the one that really took the most out of me, way more than the others. So that is why I think it is appropriate to start this video with a little story of how I got betrayed, or cheated on. So it was mid-November of 2019 in Melbourne, Australia. I went there to visit my girlfriend at the time for her birthday, and I was going to stay there for a week and a half. So it started off pretty normal. We went and do the typical relationship thing, you know, eating lunch together, watching movies, this and that. And then the day of her birthday comes, where all of a sudden, after we went through our day, she wanted to visit her quote-unquote friend's house for a private party. And me, being the beta cuck that I was, actually allowed her to go, not knowing that that friend was actually a guy. So off she went, and I was left on my own in her apartment like an idiot. Now, of course, some of you might be asking, why don't you just go with her and let her introduce you to her friend? Well, let me tell you why. I hated her friends. Bunch of good-for-nothing degenerates that only eat pizzas and smoke weed on the weekends. Yeah, I don't want to have any associations with them, so I basically told my girlfriend that she can go on her own and celebrate. Stupid, right? I know, it is stupid. So I waited for about 3 hours into the night. It was, I think, about 1:15 in the morning, and I was starting to get suspicious. But then 10 minutes later, her flatmate or apartment mate came back home, and then she asked me, "Why aren't you with your girlfriend in the club?" So I was baffled, obviously. I asked her, "The club? What club?" She said she was going to her friend's house. And then she replied, "Well, I just saw your girlfriend queuing up for Miss Collins," which is one of the nightclubs in Melbourne for those who are wondering. So of course I was angry and emotional, and without notifying my girlfriend, I immediately take a cab in the middle of the night and went straight to Miss Collins. I've already had suspicions that she is seeing someone behind my back before I even went to Melbourne to visit her. So on my way to the club, in my head I was like, I want to see this for myself. I want to see if she is really cheating on my back. I want to see the hard evidence right before my naked eyes. So I was in this really determined state to find out the truth. So as I arrived at the club, I had to queue for another like 20 to 30 minutes just to get in the club. So there I was in the club, prowling the dance floor, prowling the bar, prowling the tables, to witness a crime scene in action live. So the whole time I'm in the club, I was looking for this flash of a peculiarly shaped blonde hair, and eventually I caught a glimpse of her in one of the corners of the dance floor, dancing and making out with another bloke. Yep, most of you gentlemen who have been cheated on would probably found out through either a friend witnessing the events, or you secretly dig up her phone when she's asleep to find out that she's been sending naked pics to another man. Well, I had to witness everything live right before my eyes. Well, at least I got exactly what I wanted. I've uncovered the crime scene. Shame then that I can't call the police on them. I'm just kidding. But anyways, witnessing that, of course, my heart was floored. Like, impulsively, I want to go up to them and punch the guy in the face. But fortunately, my rational brain was still working even in the midst of a devastating heartbreak. I realized that I'm a foreigner, and any trouble with the law in Australia would have made the situations a lot worse for myself. So as I exit the club, I was still processing the whole thing. I was connecting the dots of everything, you know, her strange behaviors during calls, her excuses to go to sleep early, and many other things. It all came to make complete sense in the end. She's been banging this bloke behind my back the whole time, for months. So I decided to move out, pack my things, and move out on my own, and spend the rest of my days in Melbourne grieving about what happened. That experience, that betrayal, really scarred me more than anything I have ever experienced. But long story short, that traumatic experience made me very bitter, vengeful, verbally abusive, spiteful, and just viewing them as this really cruel creatures. As I've said in the Batman video previously, that we tend to become very biased and extreme to one end after we experience a traumatic event. And that was me. I became very biased towards women. I just just view them as this bunch of evil, malicious succubus for quite a while. But I'm a very curious man, so I needed answers. I started seeking for answers. Why would she cheat on me? I mean, there must be a reason or a collection of reasons why she would do that. Behind every action, there is always a reason. Behind every effect, there is always a cause. So I started researching and learning about female nature, and that's where I discovered the red pill. And then from there I started learning and reading about the dark side of human nature, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, learning about human thoughts, learning about human emotions, learning about human behaviors. And through that process, I actually became even angrier. Not towards anyone or anything, but at myself for not knowing or discovering all these knowledge and all these information beforehand, so that I wouldn't have got through all those troubles and all those shenanigans and get traumatized because of not knowing all this information. And also discovering that society has been lying to me all this time through the movies, the music, the books, everything that they have thrown at me ever since I was a kid has conditioned me into a delusional idealist. I was living in a fantasy all my life, and through discovering all this knowledge and information and starting to live realistically through rational and logical judgments, slowly and surely I was able to free myself of all the pain, because now I understand how things work. So basically, what cured me for my traumas was deeply educating myself of how the world works through the principles of cause and effect. In other words, the truth. And I think that is what all of us needed to do, understanding will lead to acceptance. We may experience cognitive dissonances and frustrations when we try to understand these things at first, because of our own ego investments in previous narratives. But eventually, like I always said, the truth will become self-evident to us, and it is a matter of time before we get used to it. No matter how much you try to resist the truth, you will eventually fatigue. So by knowing and understanding the reasons of why a woman would cheat on a man, I was no longer confused, I was no longer perplexed, and I was no longer hopeless, because now I have the knowledge. And with knowledge, we gain understanding. With understanding, we become accepting. And with acceptance comes peace. Because there is no longer this void of perplexity that haunts us, that confuses us, that endlessly makes us ask, why did this happen to me? And yes, it applies to my trauma being abused as a kid by my parents as well. I was always regularly beaten with a belt and locked up in an isolated room for hours. I would always wonder as a little kid, even until then, of why mom and dad were such monsters back in the day. And of course, again, after educating myself of how parents can become abusive, I start to understand why they would do such things to me, the reasons behind their anger and violence, and how their own struggles and circumstances contribute to their own behaviors. And I was no longer angry or bitter to them. And the same thing happens to the trauma of loss. If you lost a dear friend, it is an unfortunate circumstance that you have no control over. If you lost a family member, it is basically a natural evolutionary progression. It is an inevitability. And that is it, gentlemen. We can't change the past, and all the traumas that we have experienced, there is no way you can turn back time and redo what you have done. Don't go online looking for sympathy and go to those, stupid Instagram pages where they show quotes like, no matter how bad a situation becomes, everything will get better in the end. Shut the fuck up. It's just like saying a deep stab wound would heal by itself. Just let yourself bleed out to death. Traumas are deep wounds, and they require time and effort to eventually overcome. And that is why my solution to you gentlemen is to educate yourself as much as possible about your bad experiences. Information is free nowadays, and they are just at the tip of our fingertips. All you have to do is look deeper into the wormhole. At first you will be bitter, and at first you will be angry for knowing the truth. And you will constantly ask yourself, why can't things be different? Why must things behave this way? But don't you let that anger and frustration consume you and make you think emotionally. Try to understand and accept things the way they are and not how you want them to be or how they can never be to you. Thank you for watching.